All right. So hello and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. As we record this episode, spring has fully sprung here in the United States. It reminds me of a quote I saw recently from Toni Sorensen. She says, spring is far more than just changing of seasons. It is also a rebirth of spirit. So I think our guest today is going to help inspire us to embrace our own ambition and spring forward into our leadership. So Jenny Mitchell is an executive coach, a podcaster herself, and a published author who is on a mission to help people have more meaningful conversations. She's the founder and CEO of Chavender, a sought-after partner for companies in Canada, and the U.S. in the areas of executive coaching, membership, talent development, succession planning, and group coaching in both nonprofit and corporate settings. So welcome, Jenny, to the podcast. We're so excited to have you.
Well, any podcast with a name like Empowering Women, like sign me up. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid.
There you go. I love it. So for our listeners who listen quite frequently, you know the place I love to start is stories. So Jenny, we would love to hear more about your story and what brought you to where you are today.
Wow. So let me back you up to when I was a kid and I was terribly curious. I was one of those kids that sat in the back seat of the car and watched all by the way, no seatbelts, just a context set here, in the back of the car, and watched all on the highway, all these cars go by. And I would have two thoughts. One was, wow, the world is so much bigger than I thought it was. And two, how am I ever going to have time to meet all these people? So the thread in my story is people, is connecting this idea of actually having meaningful conversations, which I think has actually become harder in the last 5-6 years because we are on our devices so much more. And I fell into my backstory as I'm a classical musician of all things. So did a doctorate degree in piano, studied in New York, lived in New York for 11 years, absolutely loved that city, and really learned how to take care of myself and how to scrap, which I'm sure many of your listeners will identify with. And what happened was I fell into fundraising, raising money for pianos at the conservatory where I was working. And I got involved in not-for-profit that way and spent many wonderful years in not-for-profit. And at every turn, what I found was, the fundraising would take care of itself if I could empower the leaders to be bold and trust their own judgment. And so that's really how I landed in executive coaching. And I am convinced that coaching and empowering women, the voices that we need around these tables today, I'm not saying that we don't need male voices. What I'm saying is we need all voices. And I have found that the female approach, which is more collaborative, more thoughtful, I'm generalizing, and maybe a little bit more relationship based, really serves us well in this modern world we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I again, this does not apply to all, but I do find women tend to be more collaborative and relationship based. And one of the things I talk about in my own work is a strength that we need to employ, probably more now than ever in our recent history. So much important.
Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging it. And I think some of it's biological. I think some of it can be learned. I think some of it is blind spots. Like I think sometimes our male counterparts don't realize the blind spot they have. And similarly, I would say as women, if I think about imparting knowledge, beware of the collaboration to death too.
Oh, right? That's a good point.
Yeah. So we need decisions. Shannon, you work in a world, with engineers, it's like one of my challenges with many of my women clients when I work a little bit in high tech is when you bring something to your boss as a woman, they want to fix it for you. And maybe you just wanted to, does this sound familiar?
Oh my gosh. Like that's one of my number one struggles as a leader, because as an engineer, we're trained to be problem solvers. I jokingly say, if you want to know what an engineer is, it's a trained problem solver. That's literally what it is.
Yeah.
And so when an employee says, oh, I'm struggling with this thing, like my automatic reaction is, oh, well, here's what you need to do.
So one of the things I've been switching out language is, instead of problem solving, which by definition, like if I look at the neuroscience from the research in executive coaching, as soon as you identify something as a problem, it's attached to a threat, right? Versus calling it solution strategy, which immediately puts it in the prefrontal cortex, which immediately has it as, well, what options do I have? And I want to credit my therapists, my teenagers therapists for this one, because one of the exercises that was really hard for me as a parent when a child is going through or struggling with something was putting all the options on the table, Shannon. Like, I just want to solve the thing. I mean, I want it to go away. And what I found was, when people were involved in the choices, when the teenager, not that I'm comparing our employees to teenagers, just to be clear, but when we co-created solutions and we looked at them holistically and we took away the emotional ownership or partnership with certain topics, that the solutions were always better and they stuck better.
Yeah, sometimes they can be like teenagers, but nobody heard me say that.
Nobody heard you say that. No.
Exactly. Well, I love that you're an author. So I think a lot of us aspire to do that. So if I'm right, in March of 2024, you released a book entitled Embracing Ambition, Empowering Women to Step Out, Be Seen, and Lead, which I love. I couldn't have come up with a better title myself. So I'm always curious when I talk to authors. Tell us what motivated you to write the book, and what was the process like for you?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I think the root of it probably went back to, I'm an academic. I have a doctorate degree. I know how to write. And when you're seeped in the academic world, writing a book is the pinnacle, right, Shannon? It's like the thing.
Okay.
It's the thing. Like, you've arrived. So it was always there in my mind. But what kept happening was, I kept thinking about a whole book all about me and my style. And I was like, blah, that sounds so boring, so one-sided. Also, like, the reason I'm not a professional piano player is I hate being in a room by myself for 4 hours to practice. I like this. I mean, I'm just loving the dialogue here and the sharing of ideas. So when I went back to revisit the book concept, I said, well, what would bring joy to it? What would make it more fun? And what I wanted to do was straddle, we have these two profiles. You would probably be the data informed profile, if I may, the engineer profile, right? And then the other side is sort of the psychologist slash childhood educator side, which is all story based. And I'm
actually a mix of both.
Are you?
So,
okay.
Yeah. So there's a speech coach that I follow and have worked with, and she does a different category, and she has a little fun quiz that she gives. And I'm actually the spellbinding storyteller. So I'm one of those weird people that's a mix of both.
So this is a gift, okay? Like seriously a gift, because it means you can chameleon depending on the audience you're with. And what I wanted was a reputable book. Like, I did really think about this, that I wanted it based in research, because I do think research is important, but I wanted like the feel, what it felt like to lead as a woman, not just like the MBA book of these are the attributes you need to have and honesty and integrity. I found that really got old, and I wanted the first person experience. So I was like, I need 12 women, and they need 12 very different experiences, because no matter what, people will be able to identify with one of them. And that's, I think, what we accomplished. They're from North America. They come from different backgrounds, different skin colors, different stories. Some are not-for-profit, some are corporate, some are entrepreneurs. And I think there's something for everyone in this book. And the process, just to briefly tell you that story, I also felt it was important we didn't just write stories and then put them under a cover, because that wasn't what I was about. I truly believe that a collaborative book was one of the things I could offer the world. So I brought them all together to a hotel room in Toronto. Not one hotel room, just to be funny, but like
I was gonna say, that's a crowded hotel room. I don't care how big it is.
So it's like one hotel weekend, and we co-wrote our stories together. We crafted them and we talked them through. We talked about the obstacles, how we would position them, and we engaged an editor that worked with us through the whole process. And what it gave was a bit of more consistency and continuity, because you got 12 different voices. They're all first person. It was a nightmare to edit, I will tell you that. Maybe not my best decision, but the product means that every story is truly crafted in partnership with these women, and we all supported each other through the process, because again, these are type A women. They all have big jobs. So getting them to deadlines was always top of mind, and I didn't want it to be a burden. And then a year later, we launched the book, which is actually not bad for timing. It took us a year.
Yeah, that's actually really quick, I think, for timing.
Yeah, I think so
People
too.
think you can just whip it out. That's not really how it works.
No. And if you want a quality book, the other thing I'll tell your readers is there's reflection questions at the end of each pillar. So it's like a pillar of the research. There's 5 pillars, and then there's the stories, and then there's reflection questions. And my vision was always that they would be used at book clubs, or maybe, in your world, some big construction company, I don't know what they're called, but the women's leadership group that come together could read that section of the book and then have a discussion through those questions. And I found that when people told their stories, it explained so much more than, well, I went from this role to this role. And, the sort of the data and information, it was very different. Like I felt like I was being misunderstood, or I felt that nobody saw me in the company, or, one of the tools that someone mentioned was this. And my mandate to the authors was, tell me your story, how it felt to be in the place you were in. Pick something specific. Don't give me your life story. And finally, please tell us what you learned and how others can learn from it.
Yeah, that is so true. Because I think I can pick some moments in my career, like many women. I can almost put myself back in that moment. And it's really interesting to look at that moment, especially if it's a while ago, from the lens of today.
Yeah, I was at a women's leadership conversation, and there was this one gal that stuck in me. She's like, she got promoted into whatever it was, and it was a bunch of guys. It was electrical, something like that. And she kind of got pigeonholed, where he was like, well, I bet you don't even know what a server is. She's like, yes, I do. She has no idea what a server is, right? And because she comes from the other side, but she marches herself into the server room and like starts asking questions. One of the themes, by the way, from the leadership was these women that made it, and I just want to caveat, ambition is different for everyone. This is not about everyone becoming a CEO, but if that is an aspiration, I want you to have the tools. Everyone in the book talked about embracing challenges. So when they were offered things that they knew nothing about, they would take them. I think that's really bold. And you're smiling. Is this something that's happened to you too?
I knew nothing about podcasting, and I got this opportunity to take over host duties for this existing podcast. So yes. And then my last career pivot was a pivot into a group where I knew nothing about the function and or the technical aspects of the product.
Yeah. So I think that needs to be normalized, because what it forces you to do is to trust yourself and trust your gut and trust. So confidence, for me, the new language that I'm using around confidence is not knowing it all. Confidence is having the trust and knowing in your abilities, that even when you're in a situation where you don't understand, that you can trust yourself to figure it out. And that, even when I say it, drops my shoulders 2 inches.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation. When we get off here, I'm going to write that down as part of my takeaways.
I know. And we need to tell our younger people that too, because I think especially women, and especially for some reason, it's type A and it's women that are big thinkers. So what happens to women when they're smart is that they get promoted for their smartness. And so they continue to use that muscle, Shannon, right? Like they continue to think they can figure it out mentally, and it puts an enormous strain on their body, because their body is telling them, I mean, any kind of burnout is telling their body, saying, hey, this is too much. This is too much stress. You got to slow down. You got to trust yourself more, but you won't listen because you're busy using the tool you've always had, until you basically, everybody ends up in that place where they're like, and my story in the book, just heads up, is about panic attacks. And my body was saying, hey, you can't do this. And I was just forging ahead, and eventually it catches up with you.
Yep. I've had a panic attack before, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I didn't know what was going on until I figured it out later, but yeah, I've had one myself. So I'm with you there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's part of this book or separately, but my understanding is you've identified 5 key pillars consistently play a role in the leadership journeys of women. Just as a teaser, I'm curious if you can share one of those pillars, and I want to dig into it a little bit to understand the role it plays in a leadership journey for women.
Yeah. Oh, just one? Okay, here we go.
We can do more than one, but I want to make sure we just do at least a teaser for you.
Okay. Teaser, you've heard me talk about embracing challenge. So that is one of the pillars. You know what I want to highlight is, there's a couple, there's 5 of them, but one is the glass cliff assignment. And that's kind of a new phrase I'm hearing.
One of my favorites, actually, because I think most people don't heard of it. Yeah, most people talk about the glass ceiling, but they don't talk about the glass cliff.
Yeah. So what happens in a glass cliff assignment is You are brought in as a last chance candidate to a position because no one else in their right mind would take it. And it also has women are predominantly put in those positions, and particularly women of color and visible minorities. And why that is that it's like, well, they couldn't possibly screw it up anymore, right? And what the research says is, so they get in there and one of two things happens. They realize they've been sold a bill of goods. That's often a very disingenuous situation to be put in. And then they have to figure out how they're going to get out of it or step away from it. And the sense of risk of failure is incredibly high. But I will also challenge that if you can make it through something like that and you can own it's called heat moments. We call them heat moments in the research.
I've not heard that term.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like you get in there and it's a heat crucible and your leadership is forged in this, and it can have great benefits on the long term, but it's a really tough one. You need to have good mentors around. So that's one. I'm going to just sneak one or two more in.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one we call perception barriers. Your listeners will know that as imposter syndrome. And why I like perception barriers different or better. There are two sides to perception, Shannon. There's internal perception. Am I the best person for this? Am I ready for this? Is this where I'm going with my career? I still have 2 little kids at home, like all that perception. Right. Versus external perception is, well, she's currently the VP. Like, can she handle the CEO role?
It's a good point.
Right. So there's actually two sides to it. And I think that's an important nuance. The other one is embodied roles. So what happens with women is when they get involved, they start to, unlike our counterparts, for men, the research says that they value achievement and they go for it, but it doesn't become their identity quite the same way. With women, they start to embody the role, and their whole self-worth and success and understanding of who they are gets completely wrapped up in it. So, your VP sales.
It's interesting. I wouldn't have picked that. I actually picked that more with male, given so societal expectations that they're the provider. That's still very much in our society. Yeah. So interesting. Go ahead. I wouldn't have picked that.
Yeah. So let me clarify that when your self-worth, so that with men, when they don't get the job promotion, well, they're stupid, right? They don't get those guys don't know what they're talking about. There's an ability to decompartmentalize, but with women, it's they actually take it very personally, because this is where it gets in. They've overcommitted. They've gone past the boundary line with their role. So that's their complete identity. And to their detriment, they've given up personal relationships. They've given up marriages. They've given up. So they're so embodied that to try and pull them back. And I work a lot with women leaders around, I hate the word boundaries, so I'm just not going to use it on this podcast. I call it work-life integration. I really like that phrase. It might be from my entrepreneur world, but the ebb and flow between the bucket of work, which can be really big. I'm a workaholic. I love saying I'm a workaholic, but I also want to have a really big life bucket, and I want to really put energy and time and money into that as well, so that there's a balance and a yin and yang. So, and finally, the last one is visionary. Successful women tend to be able to see something with potential before others see it and be able to bring others along. That's a natural gift.
That's a good gift too, because I think what I've seen, women tend to get, they're hard workers. They know how to do their craft at an early age. Then they get promoted, and I think they stay in that craft and they don't start thinking visionary or strategically.
That is so true.
And unfortunately, it gets them in trouble, right? And they probably don't have the right coaches or mentors to kind of push them along and help them in a different way.
So I want to pick up on that, because what I talk about is helping number 2s become number 1s in work and life. And I totally agree with you. They get so competent as a number 2 that they never get to access their place of genius. They get stuck or pigeonholed. And what I will say is, and this is from, of course, The Big Leap, the book. But when you get to a place of excellence and you're competent and you can do it well, women tend to be very organized, because that's the way our brains work, and we make other people look really good. And so why the heck would you ever be promoted? You are doing such a great job there. Why would they ever want you to move?
Oh, yeah. And I think I can say I've fallen in that trap, and I think there's probably a lot of people listening to this podcast that have fallen into that trap.
Yeah. And we need to work harder with women to explain power and influence. Those are the two languages, the two words that I'm really helping, because women have a natural affinity to influence because we don't have big sticks. We don't have physical force. So, but we need to find a way to use and leverage our social capital, our political capital for our own uses, because we're really good at doing it for others.
Are we ever? So the whole mama bear thing comes out and we have this huge network and somebody calls us and says, hey, I'm looking for this opportunity. I'm looking at this role over here. And then I'm like this. I'm all about, okay, let's set you up with this person. And why don't you go talk to this person? I'll make the introduction. And then we often don't do it for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. We think that someone will watch out for us. So one of the big pitfalls for emerging leaders, mid-year career leaders, is they work really well with their boss and they love their boss. And I mean, I hate to say this because I'm not saying you shouldn't love your boss, but I'm also saying you cannot have visibility in the company only to one person. You've got to find a way to be on multiple portfolios and visibility across the company, because you cannot count on one person to promote you when you're ready.
Well, I think you have to have multiple advocates because people change, people move. I've had advocates in the company and they've chosen to leave or do something different. And then you're sort of stuck, right? You got to start over. So I totally agree. You can't just rely on your leader.
Yeah. One of the techniques that one of my clients does, I think is very effective, especially because she has a role that's very broad. Like she's not like one pillar. It's kind of like she has monthlies with different field people, different people across the company. And I think it's a really great strategic. So what she finds out is what is going on across the company. They're peers, just to be clear, it's not up.
Right.
But it means that she has a really good strategic network when something goes sideways or she's trying to figure out what the real story is. And it has served her incredibly well. It's part of because of the job description. She goes across product. She goes across like all sorts of different buckets, sales, marketing, product, and development. But I thought that was such a great tool and very practical for your listeners to remember.
It was very practical. Yeah, totally agree. Well, I think one thing we've sort of touched on it, but a little bit, not too much, is owning our value. Our value can be so powerful for men and women, right? But we're talking about women audience here. So I'm curious what you think women in leadership roles can place their value. We often place our value in the hands of other people. Curious how you think we can take back control of our own value.
Boy, oh boy. So it's a little bit like money. No one will take care of your money the way you will take care of your own money. And the day you learn that is the day you sit a little taller, you hold your shoulders a little brighter. Like, the same thing with women and money. I'm passionate about women and finances because it is one of the power tools, money. It's not the be all and the end all, but the minute we place our trust in someone else to take care of us, whether it's a spouse or an advisor, is the minute there's a crack. So I think that's one, understanding your own value and contribution. If you are one of those people that, and I was one too, like, oh my God, my face everywhere. I'm now like, social media, you see my face and I'm so uncomfortable. I was so uncomfortable. I'm still, it's like,
I'm really uncomfortable with that. Yeah. So you're speaking to the choir.
Yeah. Here. I noticed actually your podcast cover does not have a photo of you, Shannon. I'm just saying. So why does that matter? Because the people that need to find you need to see, know, and like you. So if you are having trouble, it's not about you. It's a little bit of get over yourself. And I had to do that. So
good point.
It's not about you. And when I shifted it that way, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. One exercise to do is to write down third person a bio or a story about yourself or your accomplishments, to look at it from a third person lens. Because women have these super strong voices in their head that attack all of your, like, we're the best at poking holes in our own things, aren't we?
I'm laughing because we are. We really are. Because I before I took this podcast and I was asked by the leader of this organization, I thought, who cares what I have to say? Like, literally, that's one of the first things that came into my head.
I know. And every time you push your boundaries, that same story is going to come up, right? Yeah. Every time. And I can't tell you why our voices are stronger. I will say that I know many men whose voices are also stronger and strong. One of the things I think about is, how can you change your relationship to self-doubt? Like, if you accepted from now on, Shannon, that those voices are there, they're just there. but how you react to them or respond to them, you get to have control over. So a couple of things to go back to your question about how do we own our power? How do we own our place? Remind yourself, do an audit of all the things you've accomplished, and remind yourself of where we tend to jump to the next thing and not acknowledge, right? Celebrations. I would love to see more female celebrations of celebrating each other. We can lift each other up. That sounds so cheesy. I know it does. And I hate that it sounds cheesy, but you know who you can call up in a girlfriend and say, guess what? I just got this XYZ. This is a small group, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to share your dreams for the flip side. I can't remember where I heard that, but let's say you want to go speak at this huge conference, right? And it's your dream, and you apply and you don't get selected the first time around. It's important to be able to share the success and the disappointment with others. So it's a lot about authenticity, but being willing to share your dreams.
Yeah, I love that. And women typically don't dream as big. Like, we need to challenge ourselves to dream bigger.
We don't.
Right? We
really what I do. A lot of mentoring I do is about teaching people to dream bigger.
I love that. And you don't have to have it all worked out. I think a dream is let's use the BHAG, the Jim Collins phrase. It's the BHAG is supposed to be something you don't actually know how to do. Like, that kind of blows my head when I think of it that way, right? And
for those of you who are not familiar with that stands for
big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I wasn't sure. Yeah.
And like, the book's written by a man. It's by two men. I think sometimes we forget. So I'm always asking why. Like, why is it that this lands this way? Why is it? So what I see is that women, maybe they have a vision or a dream, or maybe it's an idea. They don't think they're worthy of it. They don't think they can pull it off. Or they sabotage themselves by getting caught up in all the minutia and the bits and pieces of the day-to-day and the emails. I'm guilty here.
That's number 2 for me. I can do that really well.
Right? And they don't sort of carve that path. I think one of the big changes from manager to leader, and I don't have data except anecdotal, the managers, well, you've heard the old one, managers manage files and leaders manage people, fine.
Right.
But managers are responsible for today and the operations, and leaders are constantly bringing people along, casting them forward. And what I've found is that requires a lot of different kind of space in your head. If it's early morning or late afternoon, like Chavender, my company is not going to get to the next level without me actually pouring time, energy, and thought into it. But it's really hard because I don't exactly know. Like, it takes time and energy to figure that out. And so I fall back into manager because it's easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we got to celebrate the little baby steps along the way. If you just took, even it's a tiny baby step, maybe you reached out and networked with somebody who can help your business like that, even that small of a step, you got to say, okay, that was one baby step along the how, but I'm not sure how I'm going to get there.
Yeah, for sure. And I believe that, like, to go back to the beginning of this podcast, women have a special skill set that we must acknowledge and leverage, because in this new world, they need us, guys. Like, any of you who are sitting on the sidelines thinking, is now my time? It is. It absolutely is, because we're not going to get there with more arrogance, more I know best, more hierarchical structures. We're going to get there from all of us pooling our ideas and resources and then piecing it all off. Effective teams, when you have a team that flows, I do a lot of team coaching. When you have a team that flows, it is golden. You want to go to work, you want to be inspired. They challenge you. You can take their suggestions. It's not like this veiled threat when somebody has a better idea than you. I want that for everyone in the workforce.
Yeah. And they also help when things aren't doing very well, right? Either external environment or what have you. The team pulls together a lot easier.
100%.
Yep. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, I've got to hit on this because I'm a strategy nerd. We talked a little bit about strategy of visionary. So a couple episodes ago, we met with Janet Pollock, and she has a book about strategic leadership. So I'm curious what you think about, how do you see that balance versus visionary and manager in the workplace?
So that is, I love that you asked that question, because obviously it's something personal for you. And the last story in the book is Carly Schelk, and she talks, the whole story is about that. It's this idea that she runs a very successful high-end catering and events company. And she talked about the challenge of being at the visionary, crafting the next year's concepts, and then being pulled right back into the boots on the ground, plating meals. And she struggles through and it was through the pandemic. So she tells this great story. So I'm doing a little teaser for the book because I just want to.
Yep, go ahead.
The conclusion is, or her conclusion is, and I think I can support this. It's something I'm working on personally. Like, I don't want to think you guys to think I've got this all figured. If I had this figured out, I would be have a lot more money and a much nicer house. But it's this, that you have to be flexible. And I think part of it is the conscious transition from the two. Does that make sense? So if you're not aware, you have a problem. So it's okay to flop into manager and task-based and, get stuff done.
Yeah.
Space. But you have to know that that's what you're flipping into. And you might even need to label it for the team, Shannon, because they'll start to expect that from you if you are constantly there. So reminding the team of because they can cover a lot of that, at least in my little world, they can cover a lot of the manager stuff, right? There can be more, everyone can be more responsible for their files. I have never met someone who can't. And if they can't, they need to be moved out or transitioned, and that's your job. But flipping to committing to leadership time, committing to strategy, might be strategic conversations with other players, other people, other industries. That's your research bucket when you're trying to figure out, or maybe it's like a technology up level that you're looking for, all that leadership stuff. That needs to be carved out of your schedule. So I used to have 9 to 11 on Monday mornings. I would go to a coffee shop because that was the only way I could get out of my zone. And I would go with a computer that didn't have email.
Well, that's a really good strategy. Because we all get, I've heard some people talk lately about attention is the world's most needed resource right now. It's hard. It's a very scarce resource. And a lot of it's just all the notifications we get, phone, email, and your brain goes, oh, look, ding.
I can solve that problem and I can be the hero. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And to the point where executives, what I'm finding now is they're having their senior leadership team say, okay, look, if it's important, you have to text me because I have so many emails I can't actually keep up. And I don't they almost have a screening process for their emails. Like the text has become the new email as far as what's the word when you get closer to the inner circle. So please use those texts wisely. That's not just for everything and anything.
Yep.
And I do believe coaching is a great solution for this, because what we want to build is people that can either solve their own problems, to your point, or bring you, this is the situation. This is what I'm thinking about. This is how it's going to impact. Here's 2 suggestions I have for you, Mr. or Mrs. Boss. And can we talk about that? That's very different than we have a problem.
Yeah. And I deal with younger talent, which has been a different experience for me. So the line I'm trying to walk is not to be overly supportive, meaning to get too far into the 100%. Manager versus the leader.
100%. And why that's important is I call this swooping. When you swoop in, you actually.
Right? Oh, I'm a good swooper. Maybe
I know. Right. So when you swoop, you actually disempower them.
Yeah, I know. And that's not what I want to do. I don't think that's what any swooper or most swoopers really are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think, and so often it's the labeling. So I am going to intentionally sit here and ask you some good coaching questions to help you troubleshoot what's going on, right? Because I believe you're capable. And I say the same thing with feedback. So another way, there's millions of books written on feedback or feed forward, if you like that. But one of the things that I think the core element is, I'm sharing this knowledge with you because I believe in your potential. I'm sharing this knowledge or this thing with you because you are already so good at this, that this is going to be another added toolkit. Are you open, permission-based, to what I have to share? And just that simple opportunity to create a space together changes the way they receive the feedback.
Are you open to the opportunity you have to share? Man, I wish I could. I don't typically take notes during these because I'm focused on the conversation, but I'm going to go back and listen and take notes.
So it's permission-based asking, Shannon. And why I think how I learned it was, in fundraising, people think we ask for money. Well, actually what we do is we ask people if they'd like to talk about a conversation. So we're always opening it up. And Of course I have the end goal in mind, but
Right.
I need them to self-identify. And I think sometimes that's like another example of women. That's collaborative partnerships. Where would you like to go in this conversation? Where would I like to go? And I just think it's such a better, it avoids all sorts of really bad egg on your face situations, because you can collect information before you actually have to go in for the, will you take the promotion question, right?
So I know we're getting closer to the end of our time, but there's one major topic I want to make sure we still hit, and that is you recently hosted an Embracing Ambition conference, if I'm correct. So I'm just curious. I want to hear more about it. So we'll take this conversation where it goes. I'll start with what gave you the inspiration, because I know putting together a conference can be quite an ambitious endeavor.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny joke. The inspiration was Janet Donovan, who is the CEO of Girl Scouts in the heart of Pennsylvania, and her leadership team says Janet is the only person on the planet that I know that can take a ham sandwich and make it into a 5-course meal. And we all know a woman like that. And the word ambition comes to mind. So where we came with was we wanted to record the audiobook and we wanted to have the different voices. So I didn't want it to be my voice telling Onome's story or whatever. And so Janet said, well, why don't you come to Pennsylvania and we'll record? And so once we were already going for the audiobook, this is 11 of the 12 women made it, which is kind of incredible.
It is really incredible with schedules. That is amazing.
Yeah. And these are folks that have big jobs, right? Because we created a sense of community that transcended, I think, the book's experience. I'd say that's one of my gifts. Maybe if I could own my gift on this podcast, is curating rooms, like helping people connect. I care very much about that and people. So that was the first part. The second part was, she said, well, we're having a Women of Distinction event on the Wednesday night. Why don't we hold a conference where everybody speaks about their chapter, but imparts learnings? This is so on brand for Girl Scouts. And the idea kind of breathed life from there. And we had over 150 people, participants. I'd say everything from the emerging leader to the executive in the audience. It was so well received. We got some great press. Everybody got a copy of the book, Shannon. So, from a business model perspective, for those of you that are authors out there and are kind of wondering, I just want to share, you don't make money on books, spoiler alert.
Nope.
But you can.
It's more what the doors that it opens.
That's right. And I want to kind of normalize that. But I love the fact that there are 200 people in Pennsylvania that have this resource that also goes back to the podcast. And then, of course, just because we're ladies and this is what we do, we went to the spa on Friday. we went to the Hershey
That sounds
spa.
Amazing. I'm signing up next time you do this if we're going to the spa.
I know. And the different conversations we had at the spa. And the other thing I would say is we drove, 2 sets of cars drove. And the conversations you have with your girlfriends that are over a coffee are short and intense. But when you have 7 hours in a car, you get the full conversation, you get the full depth, and it was just so rich. And I was just so grateful for that time. I find women are so generous with their stories and their learnings, and I'm grateful to be somebody who's continuing to champion that, as you are too, Shannon, through these podcasts.
What were 1 or 2 particular moments or takeaways that stood out to you once you reflected back on your conference?
Oh, the first one is how similar the stories are. We think we're so different. Like you and I are in different worlds, different spheres.
But I'm connecting with a lot of what you say. So it's interesting. And for our audience sake, we've never met before. So this is the first time we've ever had an opportunity to discuss topics.
I know. And you're nodding away and smiling because the stories are much more similar than we think. So I think if you're ever afraid of sharing a story or you're not sure, I think that's one takeaway. The second takeaway, I think, is that women do things differently. I kept thinking about if this conference had been men only, and I just kind of imagined the kind of networking that would happen and the kind of business cards that would be exchanged and the way they'd kind of go home and talk about their lead gens. And I'm simplifying. I was absolutely there for lead gen, but there's an energy difference with women. And I've been thinking a lot about masculine and feminine energy, and the conference itself really highlighted the importance of feminine energy. Masculine energy, get her done, get in there, lead, make a decision. We need that. We all need both energies. Feminine energy is, I don't know why, but there's this pull. I feel this pull to her. What is her story?
Right.
I want to know. It's the sirens, the sirens on the rocks that bring the sailors in.
Right. Yep.
And that's a negative, but it's like there's a
Yep.
warmth. Help me with this. I can see you nodding.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's just like a warmth. It's like an aura that somebody has and you're like, I don't know much about them, but I feel like I already know them, but I don't know them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a different kind of trust. When I think about my philanthropy days, women donors tend to really know, like, and trust the organizations they give to. It's never just I'll give you a check, right? It's a much more deeper connection, alignment with values. This is why I think we need more women leaders. But the problem is that those profiles as leaders are seen still as weak. How's she making your decisions? Like, honestly, she's going to pick an HR leader by just her gut feeling. Like, that is an aspect to decision making. I'm not saying it's the only, but it is a piece of it, and it needs to be. It's
intuition, and I think women.
Thank you.
I have a leadership coach, like many women do, and we talk a lot about intuition and how to use that in decision making and making like that next step in your career or whatever your ambition is.
Yeah. And to take back the veil, so remove the veil on all of this and talk honestly. That's sort of every time I go on these podcasts, the who am I comes up. Who am I to talk, right? But I think, well, if I say it my way, maybe one person hears it and it lands differently for them, Shannon.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yep. Because I make a lot of my decisions, albeit in a more technical world, by human-centric leadership. And I think some people, quite frankly, see that as weak, but I would challenge them to look at the team that we have built and to see how it responds to a lot of adversity.
I love that. I just love that. And shareholder value, when we're talking corporate, it's a one line, right? So what did the company produce this year for all of its shareholders? But what people don't realize is inside that there's an arc, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And if you're not tending to your employees, if you're not treating them as humans and as part of your success, you will see a drop off, because retention is real. You can only throw so much money at people until the point where no matter how much money it is, they will not endure the experience or the culture. So be careful of looking at shareholder value as the only metric you're following.
Yep, totally agree. Well, I can't believe we're almost there. It's been so much fun, Jenny. I feel like I'd have a new sister at a distance. So the final question that I love to ask all of our guests is, what piece of advice or quote would you like to leave with our listeners?
Well, I have never gone wrong on betting on myself.
Oh, wow. That's powerful. Yep.
Yeah.
Because that gets into the challenge piece, accepting a challenge. Yep.
Yeah. I've never gone wrong on betting on myself. And that goes to spending money on a coach. That goes to changing jobs because I felt like my resume needed something. That goes to putting my face out all over the place and being okay with it.
That's my takeaway. I'm going to have to learn to be better with that.
Well, and do it the way it feels good. Go to LinkedIn, do it. There's many different, when people talk to me about social media, I'm always like, okay, there's different kinds of social media. You don't have to be like the face everywhere, but you do need to be providing thought leadership and expertise, and just find the tool that works for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I scroll on Instagram, but I'm not an Instagrammer or Facebook or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah,
time's too valuable. Your time is very valuable.
Well, betting on yourself, listeners, I think that's probably a wonderful takeaway from this whole conversation, because it really, if you're betting on yourself, you're growing and you're learning, you're challenging, and you're becoming a better human, and in turn, a better leader.
And I love that you said human. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for the time. I've really enjoyed this time with you. Listeners, this was a great gift for me and for you. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks again, Shannon.
Thanks, everybody. I will see you soon. Bye, everyone.